Let's get this show on the road. Wherever you are, get in your car and come on down, enjoy a show. If it's your first time, well, jump on in. By the end of this drive, you'll be a Shavian. No, let's get this show on the road.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, Spike.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
What is your favorite part of the summer?
Ooh.
I know. There's a lot that's like work is front and center because this is our high season. But when you step away from the shows, what's your favorite part?
Favorite part of the summer? Well, first off, I love summer. You know, everyone has their different seasons. Some people like fall, some people like winter. I don't know who likes winter, but you know, some people do. I love summer. I love everything about summer. I even love the heat. Well, I shouldn't say everything. I have pretty bad allergies, and in this region, allergies are bad. They're bad. But my favorite part of this, you know what? I think my favorite part of the summer is getting to DJ the opening night dance parties and sometimes the cricket parties as well.
Yes.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to be a DJ. I was a mobile DJ with a company in Calgary where we would do, you know, weddings, school dances, corporate events, all those types of things. And then I had a short club residency at a nightclub there. And so now once a year, I get to go and just play fun music for all my friends to just let loose after opening after working so hard and opening their shows. So I think DJing the dance party, that's probably my favorite part of the summer.
It is an amazing, amazing party. And you have such an ear and timing, and the way you just read those like epic songs, like one after the other. It's so good.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, it's not like I can do all the tricks. And I love doing the tricks. Don't get me wrong. But for me, when I'm playing, I'm reading the crowd. It's all about. And every crowd's slightly different. It's like a theater, you know, like every audience is going to have a slightly different temperature to them. But every crowd has a different vibe, and I'm reading them. I'm feeling, okay, what are they into today? What are they really into the new stuff? Are they really into the throwbacks, the 80s, the 90s, whatever it is? I'm reading them, I'm testing stuff out, and then I'm playing with the ultimate goal of just giving them a good time.
Keeping it bumping. So, it's so great. Oh, that's so good. That's so good.
What about you when you think of summer?
It's my garden. And it's one of those things because I have this life where I am busiest at work when I need to be in my garden. And so it is those moments of like, I am out at 7 or 6:30 in the morning because it's the only time that I can get out and do these things. Because if I don't, obviously, like gardening is something you just have to stay on top of because as soon as you blink, something has been taken over or has died or has been eaten, you know, like it's constantly trying to just make sure that you're staying as much on top of the little things as you can. But I absolutely adore my time in the garden, and I find it's a really great decompression time. It's just getting my hands in the dirt. It's different ways of thinking, still very creative. Like if I'm moving plants or if I want to, I think I might do this over here, or just shaping a bed. You know, there's just so much that you can do. And I love how close I get. I know this is so corny, but I get so close to the plants. Like, I really get to know, I see what you're doing. You're trying to get over that. No. You've got to stay on this side, you know, and just watching the season as it goes. I just love when things like strawberries go from the little first leaves to the flowers to the berry buds, and then finding those delicious, juicy strawberries, you know, underneath the leaves.
Do you have a favorite section of your garden these days?
Yeah, it's my herb garden. I had my hair. I love it. I love it because, and the other thing that I was so thrilled about, because again, I'm back and forth to Nova Scotia so much. And the thing that I was really pleased was I got my garlic in last fall and I had missed it the year before. And so I was able to go home last week and I was like, the garlic. It's amazing what the little things will do, but the just knowing that, okay, that was something I started last year that is growing this year, that I will have enough bulbs to see me through into 2027. And that's just one thing I don't have to remember to put on the grocery list because I've got my own garlic. So that's really nice.
Nice.
But I think that's one of the other things here at the Shaw, one of my favorite things, because it can be long days. We can be inside the refrigerator of so many of our studio theaters and our studio rehearsal halls, which is great because it's a nice opportunity to escape from some of the heat. But it is something on a break. Last night we were doing an onstage tech for Heartbreak House, and it was cold and it was beautiful and warm in the evening last night. And the whole cast and the crew, the tech crew, backstage, our backstage folks, everybody went outside. And we just sat on the curb outside the studio theater, and a butterfly came along and started, it landed on Christy Frank's head. And we were all just sitting there going, what a beautiful moment. And it was just having that chance to go outside, and the grounds at the Shaw Festival are so beautiful. And we have so many you can just take your lunch and go sit outside, look over the beautiful fields of the Parks Canada space, over the commons. We can look at this incredible pathways and these little water features. We have a lot of memorials, little plaques that are dedicated to loved ones that we have here at the Shaw that are no longer with us, but we can go in and just be reminded of their presence and who they were and what they meant to the Shaw. There's also the poems in the trees, where we have these beautiful poems that have been placed beside the trees. You can do a little poetry walk. So that's why I'm so excited that today, as we pull back the curtain on another role, another job that's here at the Shaw Festival, is our groundskeeper. And we're going to talk to Sarah Fraser, who I love meeting, as she's either pulling up weeds or planting something new or just sitting in the green room having a break and having her cup of tea. I actually will go and pester her to find out, okay, what's new? What's going in? What have you decided? So I'm really excited that we get a chance to talk to Sarah and find out more about what goes into keeping the grounds here at the Shaw.
Great. Let's hear that now.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fraser, and I'm a horticulturalist who works here on the grounds at the Festival Theatre.
How did you get your start into this incredible world? I mean, I'm a very amateur novice gardener, and I absolutely love my time in the garden. And I'm just wondering, how did you get your start? And when did you decide this was the path you wanted to be on?
I grew up in rural Saskatchewan, and it was near the Great Sand Dunes during one of the greatest droughts since the Great Depression. The only plants we had were irises and forsythia, and later on we moved to Ontario. And I think sometimes when you're here for a long time, you take for granted how abundant the Niagara region is. But it was such a shock to the system to see ocean liners lined up along the Great Lakes that look like little tiny toy boats, and to have a tapestry of every color of green you could ever possibly imagine. I think that sort of extreme contrast made me really observe gardens and nature and appreciate that. Also, in high school, horticulture is sort of a intersection point between arts and sciences. And at the time, I really couldn't decide which one I wanted to do. So it was the perfect union of both.
And was there anything along the way that sort of helped you to question or better understand this world of horticulture?
Again, early on, I had a philosophy teacher in high school who we got a whole semester to study a question. And I studied the question, are we responsible to be stewards of the environment? And in philosophy, you look at each individual word and you dissect it. And lately, I've been looking back and realizing I've had a very varied interests that nobody really sees the through line with. But I think it all comes back to that question of, what does responsibility mean to our community? What does stewardship mean of resources that are not only yours, but will benefit others in the future? Or what is environment? Which environment can be both natural and physical, but it also can be like the milieu of our social environment and how we interact as a community.
Wow. And at what point did that cross paths with the theater?
In university, after I studied horticulture, I wanted to do things on a larger scale. I did this wonderful trip throughout Europe of England, France, and the Netherlands, and saw wonderful city plannings and city parks. I ended up studying urban planning at Waterloo, and I ended up gravitating towards the theater department quite often for conversation, because I think in theater we have the openness and bravery to talk about intangibles or how lighting or the setting makes people feel. We also have conversations about community and shared spaces. And those were the questions I really wanted to ask with urban planning, gardens, and parks.
Wow. And so how did you find yourself here at the Shaw Festival, and what is that intersection for you to be working in this role at this theater?
Well, initially my grandfather moved here in the 80s, partly because of the Shaw Festival. Part of our immigrant story here in Canada is connected to Shaw plays. My grandpa was born in Dublin and would have been a contemporary of Shaw at a certain point. And when he came to Canada, he had a amateur theater company that did musicals one year and Shaw plays the next. He got an award at Expo 67 for being an actor in a Shaw play. So Shaw has always been a part of our family's narrative.
Wow.
And growing up here in Niagara, we always came to see every year. My mom would always bring me, even as a kid, to see Shaw plays, partly because it allows you think about them long after, and you continue to have the conversations because they aren't perfectly tidy answers. What led me to philosophy and being philosophical is getting into the nitty-gritty of questioning things. And so I've been observing the gardens since I was a small child and seeing its growth and development. And when I graduated from horticulture, I met Jackie Maxwell at a nursery I was working at, and I got to help her buy water lilies. And so that's sort of when I initially started thinking about that idea.
I'm curious about your work here in making some of those decisions. And, I love seeing you at various stages of weeding or planting. But maybe you could also share with us, who do you have that's actually working alongside with you? Because you have a really great relationship with the Guild. Yes?
Yeah. So the gardens have been stewarded by the Guild. There's about 20 of us that work weekly to prepare the gardens for visitors. Many of the most beautiful, diverse area of the gardens that have been cultivated over time were inspired and directed by Peggy Bell. Iconic features such as the white floor bunda roses from the fairy tale series that glow in the evening twilight in the summer near our patios were inspired by her selection. Another member of our Guild gardeners is Patty Parr, who helped to influence the structure of the garden by shepherding the landscape designer Janet Rosenberg when the studio theater was built.
Wow. So it really does feel like it's a community engagement, that you're really engaging community as you work within the gardens, and that this is, like you say, all the coming together of many parts and pieces to create a beautiful expression of another layer of the Shaw Festival. So my last question, Sarah, is just when you think about the grounds and the gardens and the projects that you've been involved in, do you have a special spot that you like to go or that you like to work on?
I see the gardens as a prelude to the panache of the performances. Nature helps us be present by influencing both the physical and the mental, by both relaxing our minds from fatigue and situating our senses to be open to observation. I love seeing everyone spill onto the patios, and I think coming early or coming out at intermission or staying after a performance, the gardens are like an aperitif to dispelling distraction and primes our theater-going experience by grounding us in the present moment.
Wow. Sarah, I could just listen to you reflect on all of this all day. I just love our conversations and the way that you are able to really articulate the connection that we have to our environment and what it actually does for our health and well-being, and that is a part of the conversation of what we're doing here at the Shaw Festival, and really trying to find ways to connect as human beings and connect to the land and really take that opportunity to have a deep breath and to enjoy what the bounty that it surrounds us. I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by and talk to us today, Sarah, and I will see you around the gardens.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Neil Barclay with this week's trivia question. The Shaw's 1968 Courthouse production of Heartbreak House featured some of the company's best-known actors, as well as an English actress who had made her name 20 years earlier as the original Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire, and who would go on to win an Academy Award for her performance in Driving Miss Daisy. Who is she? Stay tuned, and I'll give you the answer later in the episode.
Today we're going to be speaking with the creative team from Heartbreak House. Tim Carroll is the artistic director of the Shaw Festival. This year, he is directing Heartbreak House and Amadeus. Some memorable productions here include Gnit, My Fair Lady, and The Importance of Being Earnest. He also directed the award-winning Twelfth Night on Broadway, starring Mark Rylance, and most recently, Othello at the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Claudio Vena is an award-winning sound designer and composer, and he is the original music and sound designer for Heartbreak House. He has been here many times at the Shaw Festival as music director, composer, sound designer for shows like Gnit, Everybody, Desire Under the Elms, and St. Joan. Currently, he is the music director and conductor of the Phoenix Orchestra, and he is the founder and original member of Quartetto Gelato.
Ximena Pinilla is in her third season here at the Shaw. You'll see her designs in Heartbreak House and the new work by Brandon Jacobs-Jenkins. She's also worked on Snow in Midsummer, My Fair Lady, and The Orphan of Chow.
So, Ximena, who are you and what do you do in Heartbreak House?
Hi, Alexis. I am the set and costume designer for Heartbreak House.
I'm Claudio, and I'm doing the music and sound design for Heartbreak House.
I'm TC, and I'm directing Heartbreak House.
So this is an interesting conversation. We have often had chats with a director and a designer, but now we're sort of having this three-way conversation with the three of you and also myself sort of as part of the movement team for this. But actually, I wanted to start, Ximena. How did you come to the decision to enter into theater design? Because design is such an interesting thing when you look at designing productions. And I'm just wondering, how did you get your start, or what drew you into coming into the world of theater?
I have a background as an industrial designer, and all my life I've been really crafty. I was introduced to power tools before I was taught how to cook when I was a teenager. I also have a background in carpentry. And my mom used to sew just like for fun. She was a businesswoman, but crafting was always like a thing in my house. So I went to university for industrial design, and I always loved going to the theater, but I never wanted to be a performer. I never wanted to be on stage. So at some point in my mid-20s, I kind of made that connection on, okay, I love performing arts, all sorts of performing arts, and I have this background in like building, crafting. I was very curious about clothing, but didn't want to work in the fashion industry. Like fashion industry does not interest me. So at some point there was an intersection of these interests and passions and loves that I have for stage productions, carpentry, design, clothing, and yeah, like the universe of all these characters and how these manifest in the world that they live in and how they express or not express so much about themselves through their clothing. So that's how I ended up doing set and costume design.
And where did you go to university for your industrial design?
So I am originally from Colombia. So I went to university in Colombia for industrial design. And then I came to Canada to the National Theatre School to do the set and costume design program.
Wow. So there was a real cognitive shift. You just were like, this is a real shift that I'm going to go from this industrial perspective into that theater world.
Totally.
Wow, that's brilliant. So, Claudio, an interesting step for you as well. Where did you get your start for music? Has music always been in your world? And how did you find your way into composing and sound designing for theater?
Well, music wasn't always in my world. I actually wanted to be an airline pilot when I was a teenager. I loved aviation, and I actually took some lessons working towards a pilot's license, although I never completed it. But when I was we had a grade 13 in Ontario at one point, and I really excelled in mathematics and the sciences, and everyone said you should go into engineering. And I said, I don't picture myself as an engineer. So I was doing music at school, and I thought, well, you know what, I'll try music. So I applied to the University of Toronto for music performance. So that's where my foundation actually really started at U of T, when I got into like really serious classical music study, and had to do a lot of catching up because a lot of the kids that were there were way more advanced than I did. And so
right. So actually, there is sort of an idea that, if you have a career as a musician, often you would have started quite young, but you actually came to it a little bit later in life.
I actually started in grade 7. So I would have been 12, I guess. I don't know. I failed grade 2 because it was English as a second language, because we came to Canada, I couldn't speak English. So anyways, I did start late. And I didn't actually have a private teacher.
Relatively speaking. Yeah. I mean, it's, late is even at 12, it doesn't feel late. And so then from this time at U of T, you're doing a music degree. You're sort of feeling like you're immersed in that classical music world. Where did the shift to come into theater happen?
Well, I actually co-founded a group called Quartetto Gelato, and we got very, very popular across the world. And we actually have the distinction of having the top-selling classical album of any classical artist in Canada.
Wow.
Because our first CD sold about 50,000 copies, which is unheard of for a classical group. But anyway, so I was doing a lot of touring, and one day I was walking down College Street, and I saw a friend of mine in a coffee shop, in like one of these Italian coffee shops, went in and chatted, and he was sitting with a professor from Queen's University, and we started chatting, and this guy was saying, yeah, I'm doing this play, it's called Words in the Dark, and I said, what, do you need some music for it? He said, oh, you mean you'll do music? I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to do it,
Oh,
so
wow.
I actually did that. That was my first theater thing. We played a little 30-seat theater on Bloor Street, and that was the first experience. And then after that, I got contacted by the music supervisor at Stratford to see if I wanted to throw my name into the ring for a production of Hamlet that was happening with Adrian Noble directing. And so he said, just send me 3 or 4 demos. He wants a Wagnerian score. He wants kind of that sort of German feel. So I sent him, and he chose me. And then the next director I got to work with was TC, because again, Rick Fox, who was the music supervisor then, contacted me and said, well, we've got this new guy coming in to do Peter Pan, and he's looking for this kind of style of music. So can you submit some demos? And I did. And I don't know whether the $100 I slipped into the submission helped, but TC chose me as the music person for that.
Wow. So you really sort of had a real crossing of paths with TC, actually sort of almost early in your journey coming into the theater. Is you ended up working with TC quite early.
Yeah. I think the show Words in the Dark I did was in 2000, and then 2008 was Hamlet, and then 2010 I think was working with TC on Peter Pan.
All right. Well, this is a good chance for us to come over to you, TC. And I think what I'm curious about, because you've had a long career directing and obviously crossing paths with Claudio a number of years ago, but at what point would you say the idea of that integration, that collaboration with design started to come into your world as a director? What drew you into directing first of all, but then at what point did design and that real integration of design come to be a significant part of your aesthetic as a director?
I don't think any director goes into theatre without wanting to integrate with design and music. I think it's the initial impulse, actually, even though I have no gift for design and no gift for music, although of course I am a fully qualified airline pilot and industrial designer. But I think really from the very first moment I wanted to direct a play, I was already having ideas about music and about the look of it. And the great thing about starting to get going as a theatre director and starting to build a career is that you quite soon start working with really talented people. You're always working with people who are more talented than you in those fields. But then once you start taking a few steps in your career, you start working with incredible people. And then from that moment on, you're kind of addicted to the process.
Ximena, when did the Shaw Festival cross your path? How did you find yourself here?
The Shaw Festival first crossed my path like almost 10 years ago. I had just landed in Canada, getting to understand the theater world in this country, and then I very quickly learned about the festivals and was fascinated by like all the productions and the actors, like the quality of the work. But I first came to the Shaw Festival 3 years ago as an assistant designer.
We actually have an assistant design program here. There's actually a way that you can come in and work with the designers through the season. Can you share a little bit about what your experience was like?
Totally. So after finishing my program at the National Theatre School, I worked in the industry for a number of years. I wanted to have more experience before coming to the festival. I think right out of school, I felt I was too green to try. So I came here 3 years ago. I was very excited to work in both set and costumes. I wanted to keep growing on both areas. I wanted to connect with very seasoned designers, and I wanted to see the best actors of the country performing on our stages. And it's been a great experience. I've met lots of people. I've learned a lot. The growth has been significant since I first came here, and I am very happy to be given the opportunity to come back as a designer and to be supporting some of the assistant designers in the room and kind of give back because I have received so much from this place.
It's a wonderful cycle that we seem to have here in terms of that. You come through those programs and then you have those opportunities to come back to do this work and then also to pass on that information to others who are coming up and looking to work in this field and have these experiences themselves. It's a really beautiful opportunity for us to continue that process of mastering and working towards mastering a craft, but also passing it on to others. Makes it a very fulfilling experience. So coming back to this show. Okay, so here we have Heartbreak House. How do you start? How do you read a play and and have something like design come off the page?
I suspect every director has a different way into a play and a different way of talking about a play with designers. My practice is not usually to talk too much about visual ideas that I have had. I have once or twice in my career had a very strong sense that it should be this or that, but usually I prefer actually to say very little about the play, to talk in somehow very metaphorical terms about what I like or am puzzled by, and then to see what the designer's own instinct is, because I don't want to put my thumb on the scales too early.
And so, Claudio and Ximena, how does that begin? When you read a play, what comes to mind, or what do you start to hear as you're reading it and as you're starting to put some ideas together?
One of the first things that comes to my mind is the world before the people. It's like, where do I imagine these people are? But it's not an instinct of how does the house look like or how does the building look like. It's more like emotionally, where are these people? How does that landscape looks like? How does that landscape has to transform to support the journey that these characters are going through? And how do we reveal or hide some of it to our audience? And then I start digging into the world of the characters. How are they emotionally, mentally? What may be their ideas of themselves, the ideas that they have about other people, how they would like to be perceived, and what transformation they go through or don't.
And is that similar for both set and costumes? Because you have both of those roles in this production. Some productions, they are separate. You'd have a separate set designer to a costume designer. But in this case, are you drawing on those things for both set and costumes?
Yes, I think like they go in tandem for this process. How do they intersect and how do they align in certain places? And where do we want to create tension? And play with how do we tease the audience between the set and the costumes. If I am only doing set or only doing costumes for other productions, I usually reach out to the other designer and wonder, well, what are your ideas? What's your inspiration? What's your take? And how do we integrate this work that you're doing and the work that I am creating so they are cohesive and we stay in line with what we want to see on stage?
Great. What about you, Claudio? How do you start to hear a world?
So I read the play and then leave it for a couple of days and then reread it because it kind of starts to percolate inside. And I pick up on emotions. I look for kind of vulnerabilities. I look for the tapestry of connection between all of our shared experiences, because there are words, but we've all shared those same emotions, those same experiences. So I start to come up with ideas, and I'll just like either sing them into my phone or I'll go into the studio and just flesh them out as a 30-second idea and just maybe 10 or 12 ideas. And then I like to get the designer's drawings just because then that creates more of a different world. And then I usually start bugging TC at some point saying, so do you have any comparative perspective of the time frame? Are we aiming for the 20s? Are we aiming for a modern interpretation? And that sort of helps to hone it. And then that I usually come up with a dozen ideas, and then I will fire them off. And usually TC's pretty quick with getting back saying, I like this one. I like this one. I'm not sure if this one works. So it kind of helps to hone in that box for me then at that point.
It's important to note that the sequence of events with this, because there's a great difference between set, costume and music in terms of period. So one of the first questions you're always going to be asking yourself is, are we setting this in the period it's set in? Are we setting it in the period it was written in, which is sometimes different? Or are we setting it in some other period, most obviously the modern day? Now, the big difference is that with set, you can have a very abstract set that says very little about period, but you can't have costume that doesn't say something about period. There's no such thing as timeless costume. Even science fiction costumes look very different depending on whether they're 60s sci-fi or modern sci-fi. And similarly, music always comes with some sort of information about the period. Although I note that audiences are much more tolerant of anachronism in music than in costume. If you use music from 100 years out in either direction, too early or too late, most of the audience don't notice and the rest don't care. But if you get the costume even 50 years out, you will have angry letters.
What were some of those first images, as we've just talked about, sort of those first impressions as you started to read Heartbreak House? What came forward for you in those first reads?
I didn't understand it.
How do you mean?
I didn't understand it. I still don't. That's why I ended up doing it. I was trying to choose between Heartbreak House and another play that I won't name because we're going to do it soon. And the other play was much simpler and more immediately attractive. And I was talking to Tom Rooney, and he said, yes, but Heartbreak House has got under your skin, hasn't it? I can tell. And as soon as he said that, I thought, oh yeah, bugger, I'm going to have to do it.
It does get under your skin. Like when you first read it, it's very dense. Like it's pages and pages and pages of interaction between characters, and they're just kind of throwing things at you. You have to think, are they serious, or like, are they putting on a show? Is this what they actually believe? Are they that pompous? And so you kind of like have to, it really makes you think about like who these people are. And of course you always relate it to your own life and sort of go, yeah, I actually have a friend that's like that. Yeah, you know what? That is so true.
To be honest, I kept reading and thinking, where is this going? What is happening? But the more I read it, the more I could deep dive into the actual words and the subtext, the things that were not said but were implied. And then it started to feel very relevant. Some of the subjects in Heartbreak House feel like they are still very valid today. And that's how I ended up falling in love with the script. I still don't fully understand it, like TCE, but it has very fascinating parts and parts that I feel I can connect to. And some parts could be very, very valid today.
So where are you now in this process? Because it's an interesting moment where we today, actually, as we record this, it's our last day in the rehearsal hall, and we're about to make this leap into now putting this into the space and onto the stage. And we are going to start to be layering in more of these design elements. And we're sort of at this interesting place as we make this transition. And I'm wondering, where are you in this part of your process? And what are some of those things that are yet to come? What's sort of coming up for you each as we go into this next phase?
So I had a conversation with TC saying, I really don't see much music in this play because it's so centered and thick, and it moves very slowly. So you can't really have any kind of incidental music because it'll have to play out for 20 minutes. And so he said, yes, Claudia, you're going to have to exercise a lot of restraint in this one. So I kind of that eased my conscience because I felt like I wasn't actually contributing enough to this. And then we found a real kind of, TC came up with like an interesting way of incorporating the music as a sort of way of offering up a different kind of sound texture to kind of break the play up into sort of digestible chunks, and so we're putting music in whenever we have the two characters that we affectionately call Misty right now, who
Michael Terrio and Christy Frank, Misty.
Yeah, exactly. Who actually announce all the staging, not all the staging, but they announce staging. So we're not going to be doing any kind of sound effects, but there is going to be music that's going to be accompanying those little vignettes. So coming up with kind of the right choices for that world. When I first read the play, I thought, this is like Mozart, because like they're very aristocratic, and, they have a feeling of owning the world, and they can just sit back and let the world come to them in a certain sense and enjoy like an afternoon pastry with an espresso, listening to Mozart, some kind of light works of Mozart. And so that's where I kind of started digging around. It was interesting that the TC then said, yeah, I'd like to have Mozart in this. So it was kind of, okay, we're sort of on the same channel now.
And it was wonderful, Ximena, yesterday being able to have a little moment of walking into the studio theater, seeing the beautiful floor, seeing some of the different pieces that we've been using actually in the space. What is this next phase for you as you watch some of your work now literally coming into the room?
So, as you mentioned, Spike, we are about to leave the rehearsal hall and move into the theater for onstage rehearsals. And it's very exciting to see it all come together, see the actors actually rehearse on stage. It can either bring a lot of doubt or bring a lot of certainty on the decisions that were made early in the process. On the costume end, the teams are working really hard to finish all the costumes. We are still having fittings with the actors almost every day, and very soon we're going to have costumes on stage.
What's it going to be like for our movement director, Spike?
Well, this is where I like what you said, Ximena, and you've got one foot in the rehearsal world, one foot in this transformation into this evolution world, and it does bring with it doubt. And especially with this play, especially with the space that we're in and what we're navigating is quite a minimalist, minimal sound, minimal real set pieces, props. And so I think there is this curiosity as we go forward into the next phase of the things that we've been rehearsing with, that transfer into, is this where it wants to land?
So what does that mean for you as a movement director? What's your job in a show like this if there is no real scenery?
It's with the bodies in space and how we're using them and how they interact with each other, how they walk, how they move, where their gestures are, how they encounter the different objects that we do have. And I think that that's where the ability of our performers to really elevate their own physicality to become part of the set, that they are describing the space. And there's a connection between what we're hearing and how they're moving. And then in that relationship, like you say, Claudio, with the sound or absence of sound, that the body creates a kind of noise when it moves. There is a sound. It's not the actual thump of feet on the ground, but there is it comes with a noise. And so how do we balance that physicality? And so TC, for you, when you come into this next phase, how do you navigate bringing those elements to life and those decisions? And now we've got to start really making some. What's that process like, or how terrifying might that be?
Well, after 40 years directing, it's both terrifying and very familiar. So I'm used to being terrified. The main thing, of course, is I just have to rely on my team. I mean, I have to rely on my designer to have made them look as beautiful as the costume sketches look. I have to rely on the movement director to take the big change, which is that they're all now in those costumes. And, that's your job, isn't it? To make sure that they can do every move that they've been doing in rehearsal and different ones that they can adapt to being in 1916 costumes. I have to rely on the lighting designer to be tasteful. And I have to rely on both Claudio and Louise, the lighting designer, to keep working with this idea that we don't see or hear very much. Instead, we have Misty telling us what we would otherwise be seeing or hearing.
And that has a lot to do with the fact that there's such elaborate stage directions in George Bernard Shaw's plays. And he's very well known for having long introductory descriptions and long character descriptions before someone walks in the room. And what was your decision to include that? How did that decision come about for you to actually make that a feature as opposed to, typically it's good to ignore stage directions and not have them influence, but here we're actually speaking some of them out loud?
There's definitely a feature of plays written around the time of Bernard Shaw, around the turn of the 20th century, that they tended not to be performed very often, and the vast majority of the audience for the play would read the play rather than see it. And that puts a premium on the author and his ability to create the impression of a production. And that's, I think, why in Barry and O'Neill and Shaw and playwrights of that period, you get these very elaborate descriptions, both of the people and of the actions they take. You're right, of course, that you don't need to bring those to the surface in a production. But in the case of this play, I felt that the very elaborate description of the house as looking a bit like a ship was something that we could really go down a blind alley trying to make all of that happen. And in the studio, it would end up being very cluttered and messy. And I like clean stages. I like space for the actors to play in, especially when you have a big cast like this. So stripping away the stage and having some of the stage directions read out came from the same instinct for clarity.
So what are some of the things that you're looking forward to, Claudio and Ximena, just as we start to wrap up our chat? What are some of the things that you are wanting to sort of see come to life or looking forward to coming to life as we move into this next stage?
Well, for me, I always love when we get into the theater because, tomorrow I'm going to be laying in the music with the tech so that it's already programmed. And of course, there'll be additions and changes as we go through the rehearsal process. But to see the actors start to show up in costume, I go like, okay, now the world's coming to life. So it actually, that inspires me even more, just kind of seeing that all come to life, because it sparks ideas that I might change some things up, or I might, propose a slight variation on what we may have already established up to this point. So I always kind of feel like we're always crafting this work of art until the day that it opens. That's really exciting for me to sort of be able to kind of get to this point where we're just kind of now going to be sharing this experience.
Mm-hmm. And you, Ximena?
I am excited to enter the tech process and see everything come together. See the set, the costumes, the music, the lighting, and all the acting come together. I am also very excited about seeing the costumes and how they will affect the body language.
Me
Things
too.
like stiff collars that will make people stand up very straight, or a little bit more restricted garments for some of the women. Our body languages nowadays are very relaxed, like the clothes we wear. But back then, the body language was different, and it was very informed by the clothing. And we have been paying a lot of attention to this with the actors during the fittings and understanding the Edwardian etiquette and how will that inform the other departments. And ultimately, I'm very excited to see the audience react to what we have created.
Yes. I remember there was a specific ask. You and I were working together in rehearsal, and it was very clear that we needed to ask for rehearsal skirts that had a train. So they needed to have that extended piece at the back, because I was looking at your sketches that were up on the wall, and the rehearsal skirts we had in were sort of ankle length, and realizing actually we need to get some of these longer so that the women can practice with being able to make those elegant turns and watch that they don't trip over the train, which is at the back, which is very different than having a long circular skirt. A train is very different because it drapes long at the back. You almost forget it's there until you step backwards and, oh my goodness, I've stepped on the train. So having that little bit of help and support in the rehearsal hall, even before we get the costumes, just to have those practice items to work in has been, I think, really helpful for our company as well, to be able to get into that world, and that world of the aesthetic and the manners is great. Okay, so last question for all of you, which may be a little bit more challenging just because we haven't actually sort of entered this final phase of really incorporating all these elements of design. But as you think about the audience members who are coming now to come and see the show by the time that this airs, and they've bought their tickets, they're going to come and sit in the audience, is there something that you would like to suggest they look for or listen for as you think of this production, that maybe there's a little Easter egg or a little special moment that you would like just to maybe ask them to keep an eye out for, might be fun for them to look out for?
I'm deliberately, with the encouragement of TC, going to be quoting some of Mozart's works exactly, and which I think is really fantastic. And that might be kind of interesting because people may hear something that sounds like Mozart, but it's actually something that I wrote based on that style. And then they hear, oh, that is Mozart. So was that first piece is a piano concerto that we heard that he wrote? No, it wasn't. But it'll be interesting to see who can decipher that sort of Rubik's Cube of which is Mozart, which is Claudio Vena, sounding like Mozart, hopefully.
Riffing off of Mozart. I love it.
Yeah.
I think on my end, I would encourage the audience to not get too deep on the stage directions and the productions of Heartbreak House, because we are proposing something different from how it's usually produced. And I will also tell them to read the news, be very informed on what happens today, because it will connect very good with the script. It will feel very current and very relevant if you are familiar with what's going on today in the world.
Nice. Okay. And TC?
I think the explosions in Act 3, in some sense, feel as though they come from nowhere. We suddenly have some flying machines which are dropping bombs on these people. And of course, in 1916, the audience would know that and would spend the whole play wondering when the war was going to impinge on these people's lives. So I would just tell the audience to have in mind throughout the play that these people are going to have bombs dropped on them, and see how that changes your view.
Well, thank you all for joining me today in this conversation about Heartbreak House. Very enlightening to get a window into all those design pieces that come together to really lift a production off the page. And I will see you all very shortly for our last day in the rehearsal hall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis.
See you for run through.
I promised to tell you which Oscar-winning actress appeared in the 1968 production of Heartbreak House, 20 years after she'd been the first Blanche Dubois, and 20 years before she won an Academy Award for driving Miss Daisy. And the answer is Jessica Tandy. She played the role of Hussaini Hushabye, and her father, Captain Shotover, was played by Shaw legend Tony Van Bridge, who was actually 8 years younger than Tandy in real life.
Heartbreak House is playing until October 3rd. Tickets available at shawfest.com.
Thanks to TC, Ximena, and Claudio for joining us, and thank you, as always, for listening. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to say hello, drop us a line at podcast@shawfest.com.
Let's Get This Shaw on the Road is hosted by Alexis Milligan and produced by me, Kelly Wong. Original music by Travis Cito. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review.
Next week, we will be hearing more about the final show opening in the Studio Theater this season, Ohio State Murders by Adrienne Kennedy.
Let's get this Shaw on the road.